Dear students, welcome back to the Embedded Systems class. In the today's session, we'll try to complete the two bus architectures which are there in the embedded systems, known as an advanced bus architectures, which is known as I square C bus architecture and the CAN bus architecture. So I square C, that means I to the power 2 and C is the I square C bus architecture, which stands for the inter-integrated circuit architecture. And CAN bus, which is something like a controller based architecture. So controller area network architecture. So these two are the more popular architectures in the case of the construction of the buses in between various devices connected in the embedded systems. So what is basically embedded system? Embedded system is going to comprising of many digital devices interconnected to perform a specific task, is simply known as an embedded system. That means embedded system is also going to comprise of many different types of the networks which are interconnected, which are integrated to perform a specific task, is simply known as an embedded system. Okay, so in that perspective, that means it is totally embedded system is totally specific to the application. Based on the type of the application, the architecture of the embedded system, the software involved with the embedded system, and a bus architecture using the embedded system is always going to change. So embedded system is something like a tailored computer system, is known as an embedded system for us. Okay, so in today's session, we'll straight away go with discussions. Straight away going discussing with the I square C bus and the CAN bus architectures. Okay. There is an important application in the case of embedded systems that is called distributed embedded applications. That means the subsystems which are there in the embedded system are normally going to placed at a distance of 40 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters away from the central based system, or one system is normally placed with 40-meter distance with another system, and all the systems are normally going to operate collectively to perform a specific task, is basically known as a distributed type of the embedded systems. Okay, so now there are two bus architectures which are very popular in the field of the distributed. So in the case of this distributed embedded system, two bus architectures are popular. One is called I square C, another one is CAN bus. I square C stands for Inter-Integrated Circuits Protocol bus architecture. Another one is CAN bus, Controller Area Network Architectures. We go with the first one, that is I square C. It was first introduced by the Philips Semiconductors in 1982. And they have normally did an experiment to transmit a serial, but that means to transmit data serially by using a serial bus short distance communication. That means they have initially performed an experiment to communicate a signal over a short distance using the serial bus architecture. Therefore, this particular I square C bus can be called as a simple low bandwidth serial bus short distance protocol, which consists of three data transfer speeds such as standard, fast mode, and high speed mode. So I square C bus operates with these three standards called as standard, fast mode, high speed mode. What is the purpose of a bus? In general, bus is known as the number of wires connected between two or more peripherals in a system for transferring the data from one peripheral to another peripheral. That means for transfer of data between one or many systems in an interconnected system, we normally use the buses. That means using buses, we transfer the information, or we transfer the data. Now, how many types of data transfers we have? We have data transfer in terms of three basic kind of data are there. One is controls informations we have to transmit. We have to transmit handshaking signals, and we have to transfer the actual data. Okay, so these three are the basic data transfer operations which we continuously going to do in the data communications field or digital to digital peripheral communication field. So this I2C bus supports 7-bit and 10-bit address based devices. That means what could be the address bits of the devices that we are going to connect in the distributed embedded system. This I2C bus is going to support 7-bit and 10-bit address spaces for the devices being connected in the network. And one of the greatest feature of this is going to be like it supports the inside the box needs. What is the meaning of inside the box? Say the example has been given something like this here. Let us consider that there is going to be an embedded system. This entire embedded system is known as the box. That means the entire specific application. Inside this application, we normally going to use different types of peripheral devices. Every peripheral is normally going to perform its own task, but all the peripherals connected internally is going to perform a specific overall task. When I think about a specific task, what I mean is that the specific set of tasks, specific set of programs that a system is normally going to perform. That means an embedded system may perform one task, two tasks, three tasks, or hundreds of tasks. But once it is designed to perform, say, 10 tasks, it will be performing only 10 tasks. That is what I mean by saying different tasks. Okay. It is not like a general purpose system. In the case of general purpose system, you may be taking the work of providing 10 different services currently. Now, this can be extended to n number of services to be provided by the system in the future. Say, for example, you are using a microprocessor based system and you are doing 10 different tasks currently. Tomorrow, because of the needs, we may extend this to 20 different systems. And after that, we may get a need to support 30 applications. So you can simply extend this to provide 30 different applications. Coming to embedded system, if you program the embedded system to perform 10 different tasks, then you cannot really enhance its capability at the later stage of the time. You have to leave with whatever that is there with the embedded system. That is what we mean by saying it. Okay. So inside the box means what? Inside the box, you may have the components to support 10 different implementations, 10 different operations, or 20 different operations. Once it is designed, it is going to be like a box. You really cannot upgrade. You may upgrade, but you cannot really enhance or increase the number of capabilities. Upgradation option is always going to be provided in the system, in the advanced and embedded systems. Upgradation is always going to get provided, but adding a new extra service to the existing embedded system is really going to be a challenging task. And if it is really going to provide like that, it cannot be called as a embedded system as such. Okay, so embedded system is totally specific to the application. Okay. Now let us think about the I2C bus architecture, how it is normally been designed. There are two lines. There are two bunch of lines called SCL and SDA, serial data and serial clock signal generators. So these two signals are normally used to interconnect various peripherals connected to the central microcontroller in the embedded system. So in general, you're going to have only a single master microcontroller system, which is normally going to send the control signals to all the peripherals connected to the various types of applications in the embedded system. Okay. That means this peripheral device 1, device 2, device 3 are simply connected to different types of applications. But once you design this entire system, This system is normally going to perform the same task in the future also. If at all you wanted to change this task, remove this task, add something else, or you wanted to add one more new task, you really cannot do this kind of tailoring work in the case of embedded systems. Okay, so like this, we can have a bus connections in the embedded system. That means buses are normally used to transmit the data. That's what we are doing it here. Now, apart from this, apart from transmitting the data in the bus architectures, it can be used as interfaces. It can be used as interfaces to interface signal processing devices that have separate application specific data interfaces. That means the signal processing units are today, in the today's world, signal processing unit is going to be a pretty much challenging task, because we want to make the system as something like automated system, AI based systems. So in that case, say for example, voice processing applications, I want to connect it to the embedded system. So that means I can have that control interfaces to interact to the microcontroller, which is going to be a voice based control based systems. So the I2C is really going to support that kind of interfaces also. Okay, so I2C is also used as a control interface, can be used as a control interfaces by many companies to interface signal processing devices that have separate application specific data interfaces. What are the companies which are really doing this task? Say such as Philips, Siemens company, National Semiconductor Devices company, etc. All these companies are really doing a lot of work in the area of developing the control interfaces to different types of the user interacting interfaces. The next concept that we're going to have in the I2C bus architecture is going to be a master and slave concept. Every node in the network connected, or every peripheral in the network connected, can be called as a master and a slave. Now, what type of devices are called as a masters? What type of devices are called as a slave? It is already known to us. So a master is a device that normally initiates a transaction on the I2C bus is termed as a master. That means a master is the one which is always going to initiate the transaction. That means whoever is going to control the entire devices or peripherals in the system, that is usually called as a master. So that is going to initiate the communication. That means the master is normally going to control the clock signals. So using clock signals, we normally going to send the control signals. So whichever peripherals are applied with a positive clock signal, or say rising edge clock signal or trailing edge clock signal, we say that that particular digital device is ready to either transmit the data or to receive the data. If no clock signal is applied to a particular peripheral device, which means what? That peripheral device has been made intentionally disable with all the operations. Now, who has to send such control signals? It is the master, because master is nothing but something like a big computer with a lot of huge amounts of memory with a high processing speed, so that it can able to really control the various devices in the network. Now, what is a slave? A device being addressed by the master is called a slave. So master is going to choose the slaves in the network architecture. So every slave will try to implement clock stretching operation. Now, since every slave is chosen by a master in the embedded system architecture, every slave has given an option of providing the clock stretching. That means there may be some slow peripherals operating in the embedded system. So in that case, that slow peripheral system is always going to keep the SCL signal low, which is connected to its internal buses, so that the master can wait until the slave gets ready to accept the control signals or data signals coming from the master. So that particular process or operation is known as clock stretching operation. Slaves will be provided an option to extend its time until it gets ready to accept the signals from the master. That is nothing but clock stretching is nothing but keeping the serial clock signal low until the slave gets ready. So that means if master is sending some information, slave should be ready to accept the information. All right. So that means for that purpose, there should be a control on the slave itself about its internal data speeds, internal bus traffic. That means internal bus is maybe the slave may be busy in doing some other task. By the time when the master sends a request to the slave, then slave can always keep this SCL signal low until it gets ready to accept signals from the master. So that option has been given to the slave, and that option is known as the clock stretching operation. So this is what one of the important feature that is there in the I2C bus architecture. So as usual, I2C protocol supports multiple masters. There can be multiple masters in the embedded systems, but usually most systems designs with only one master, something like a centralized architecture based type of the systems. There is going to be one master and many slaves. If more than one master is there, that means there should be a communication between these masters, among these masters, before the controlling action will be taken onto the slaves. Okay, that means there should be a cooperative dialogue between the group of masters connected in the embedded system, if at all it is required. Okay, but otherwise we normally go with a single master in the embedded system, but with many different slaves. So this is what we have. Next, what is the basic structure of an I2C bus architecture, bus based system? See here, master 1, master 2, slave 1, slave 2, slave 3, I can just have. Now these master 1, master 2, slave 1, slave 2 are internally connected by SCL and SDC bus lines. You can have many different wires here. What is a bus? Bus is nothing but collection of wires used to transfer data, control signals or handshaking signals between the two different nodes or two different terminals or two different workstations or two different computers. So whatever you can just simply name them as are stations. Whatever you can simply name them as, you can name them. You can name them as stations, workstations, you know, work groups. You can just simply call it as server. You can call it as client. It is up to us based on the application. So like this, various nodes or terminals are interconnected to have the communication using the SDL and SCL signals. Now, what about the internal electrical interfaces to the I2C bus? Now, there are two options only we have. Either the SDL bus is going to be high or low. Similarly, SCL is going to be either clock applied or not applied. Okay. Now that can be really operated or controlled by using the data interface and clock interface circuits. It is as good as pulling up, pulling down the control lines. Okay. So for example, if you ascertain this data, that means I wanted to, transfer some data onto the data bus. Then what we'll do, we simply ascertain this data to 1, then this transistor is going to get closed. Once transistor is going to get closed, that means what, this SDL line is going to go high. When the SDL line goes high in the positive logic, data can be simply placed onto the data bus. Right. Similarly, clock. If you want to apply the clock, this has to be high for it to be applied. Clock, if it is going to be a positive logic. For negative logic, reverse process is normally going to get applied for us. So using these electrical control signals, we normally going to control the operation of the buses. Okay. Like this, we can just simply draw the I2C bus architecture and we can see the internal electrical interfaces to the I2C bus architectures. And I want to transfer the data. Now, what about the part of data? To transfer data, we normally going to transfer the data by using the data transfer control word. Okay, for communication purpose. So this figure 2 is normally going to show the data format for transferring the data or for communicating the data to another computer. So always say the master begins the communication by issuing a start condition known as S. If it transmits the first bit as S, means that it is nothing but the start bit of the data. Then it is going to end up this 8-bit word is going to end up with read write control signal and the acknowledge signal. Okay, that means read write can be done by slave or as well as the master, doesn't matter. Right. So in this case, master is normally transmitting the data to the slave and a slave is going to receive data from the master. That is what the example has been shown it over here. See here, the first 7 bits are in the first 7 bits. The first one is going to be MSB bit. The last one is going to be LSB bit of the data that we are interested to transmit. Like that, we normally going to transmit the data. And after transferring the data, first of all, the slaves has to be identified on the bus. That means before the master want to transmit some data, the master is going to transmit or send the address of the slave computer to which the master want to transmit the data. So that means the first one is start bit by the master, stating that the master has got some data to transmit. Then it just simply sends the address, 7-bit address, or say for example 10-bit address onto the MSB to LSB bits. Then what type of action that the master want to perform on the slave, whether master want to transmit data or master want to receive data from the slave, that information is normally provided read write information, then acknowledgement information. So these acknowledgements are normally kept open for receivers to fill. That information is transmitted. Then after this data, after this packet, after this frame is transmitted onto the bus, then this is, let us suppose, received by the slave. Then after slave receives this, slave is going to transmit the same thing to the master by sending a positive acknowledgement. So if positive, after receiving positive acknowledgement, what the master will do? Master is going to simply put or transmit data onto the data bus. So after that, again, the master is going to really transmit data packets. So if the master is going to stop its transfer of data, it is simply going to send a symbol called F. This F stands for stop of the data transfer operations. So like this, in this format, the communication is normally going to become possible enough between the two different devices, right? So this is how we normally going to transmit the data in this particular I2C bus. Now in the case of we normally prefer active low logic. In the case of active low logic, initially the SCL will be high. SCL will be high means what? Clock signal is normally being put onto the bus. If clock is on means what? The data SDL will be low. If SDL is low, that means now you can really transfer the data. Data byte will be simply transmitted on the data bus. After transmitting every 8 bits, an acknowledgement will will get received by the master from the slave. Like that, the communication is normally going to happen continuously. At the end of communication, the stop signal is issued by setting both SCL and SDL going to be high. So that means here stop signal is transmitted means what? The SDL should be high. If SDL is high means what? The data transfer has simply got stopped. Like that, we normally going to initiate the operations and do the data transfer operations. So this is what the I2C interface to the microcontroller. So microcontroller is going to have inbuilt chip, and it may have access to some external memory, and it has to use the bus I2C bus using the I2C device driver program or interfacing program in order to access. Now to interface this, it is going to use SCL and SDL lines. So using these two control lines, it is normally going to transfer the data between the memory and the microprocessor. That means, say for example, I want to transfer data from memory into the microcontroller microprocessor, then via this I2C bus, we normally going to transfer the data. That means in between microprocessor and microcontroller, in between microprocessor or a microcontroller and memory unit, you normally going to have the I2C bus interface unit. So using this unit, we normally going to transmit the data. Okay, that means there should be a connection between the memory and the bus interface unit and the microcontrollers. So like this, communication is normally going to get implemented in this bus architecture. So the bus operations are controlled by SCL and SDL signals. Now, to end up with this CAN bus architectures, we end up with advantages and disadvantages. Right. What are the advantages that the CAN bus, the I2C bus is going to have? The I2C competitive advantage over low speed short distance communication schemes is that its cost and complexity. The cost and its complexity don't scale up with the number of devices on the bus. That means even though the number of peripherals that are being connected in the embedded system are going to increase, but still the cost is not going to increase and the complexity is also not going to increase. That means the cost and complexity don't scale up. Even then, we increase the number of devices in the bus architecture, in this I2C bus architecture. That is what one of the greatest advantage that one can have in this particular I2C bus architecture. Next one is this I2C bus architecture is going to be very much suitable for inside the box communication needs. Inside the box means what? It is simply going to be a onboard kind of communications. It is only between the specific peripherals connected in the system. You cannot really perform out of the box communications. So inside the box only, you can make all the communications. That is what called, that means internal peripheral communication or internal device communication in the embedded system is simply known as the inside the box type of the communications. So with it has got inbuilt addressing scheme and a straightforward means to transfer strings of bytes. This I2C is an elegant and minimalist solution for the modest inside the box communication needs. Now, the I2C bus architecture internally is going to have built-in addressing scheme, and it is going to have straightforward means to transfer the bytes of data. Because of these two internal flexibilities, we normally can say that it provides a very good inside the box communication needs. It performs inside the box communication needs. Now, what is the drawback? Drawback is on the software front. On the hardware front, there is no drawback. but there is a drawback on the software front. That means the complexity of supporting this I2C software components can be significantly higher than that of the several competing schemes such as SPI, Microwire, etc. in a very simple configurations. That means the software complexity is normally going to be high in the case of I2C architecture. Why software complexity is going to be an issue here? The issue is that we can connect different types of systems to the microcontroller, which is nothing but a master. When you connect different types of systems, what happens? The integrity is going to become an issue between one system to the another system. So in that case, what happens is the complexity of developing the software component for such devices or peripherals is going to become a challenging task. Therefore, there is going to be a drawback, of course. And one more benefit we get because of the usage of SCL and SDL is that we can avoid the duplicate operations. That means, what is duplicate? When two or more devices try to drive either SCL or SDL to different values, then what happens? There are many devices connected in the embedded system architecture. Now, in that case, what happens is if more than one device want to drive serial clock signal or serial data signal to different values, then if the bus architecture allows that, then what happens? Ambiguity arises. To avoid that ambiguity, the open collector and open drain circuitry prevents those errors. Okay, that means that is why master is always going to be one. If only one single master is there, the master is normally going to control these operations by using the open collector, open drain circuitry configurations. Okay, so these are the advantages, disadvantages of the I2C bus architecture. And the last bus architecture is going to be called as CAN bus, called as controller area network bus architecture. So the first invention that has been done on the CAN bus was designed for automotive electronics. That means for automobile engineering, that means to automate the systems, we have people have generated the bus architecture in the production of cars in 1991. Now, in comparison to the I2C bus architecture, I2C bus architecture can support to the maximum of around 400 kilobits per second. That means it is also going to be somewhat low, but that's okay. But internal communication, we can make it faster by providing more number of bus lines. That is parallel communication. Okay, that means here, whereas bus architecture, CAN bus also uses bit serial transmissions. CAN bus runs at a rate of 1 megabits per second over a twisted pair connection of 40 meters. That means the comparatively CAN bus can support up to 1 megabytes of data transfers. Whereas I2C bus is going to support maximum 400 kilobytes per second. That means CAN bus is somewhat advanced version of the I2C bus architecture. An optical link can also be used because it supports somewhat maximum speed of communications of 1 megabyte in comparison to I2C bus. You can have optical fiber also. So this bus protocol is going to support multiple masters on the bus. Slaves anyway going to be multiple, but the issue is going to be on the master's side. You can have multiple masters on this particular kind of a bus. Now, what about the physical and electrical organization of the CAN bus? Every node internally is going to have the driver software, driver hardware and software, which is normally going to control the operations on the bus, right? So that means here you're going to have two modes of operation. One is called as recessive and dominant mode. If one is, if we are transferring the data, you're going to pull up the system, and by making this one, by making the control line as one, called as recessive, and if at all you wanted to stop the communication, you simply make it as a dominant mode. Okay, so like this, we can just simply control the operations on the CAN bus architecture. So these electrical interfaces are going to have some features. What are its features? Each node in the CAN bus has its own electrical drivers and receivers. That means every node is supported with its own electrical drivers and receivers that connect the nodes to the bus in the wide end fashion. That means every node whichever wanted to connect to this kind of a bus should have its own internal provision of electrical drivers and receivers. So in CAN bus, a logic 1 on the bus is called as recessive and logic 0 on the bus is called as the dominant. So these are the names which we gave for these two. Now why we use these driving buses, these driving circuits. See this, there is an AND gate, there is a buffer, there is a NOT gate, there is a transistor here. So the combination of all this is simply called as a driving circuit. The driving circuits on the bus causes the bus to be pulled down to 0. If any node on the bus pulls the bus down. That means the driving circuits on the bus causes the bus to be pulled down to 0. That means we can, why we use normally driving circuits? To pull the bus down or to pull the bus up. To perform that actions, that operations, we normally use these driving circuits. So whenever all nodes are transmitting once, the bus is said to be in the recessive state. Say node 1, this is node 2, node 1 want to transmit. Then the bus will be in the recessive state. If node 1 want to, if node 2 want to transmit, again, this particular bus will be in the recessive state. Okay. And when a node transmits a 0, a bus will be in the dominant state. So data are sent on the network in packets known as the data frame. That means we can send a 0 or 1. If you are transmitting 1, it is working in the dominant state. If you are transmitting 1, it will be working in the recessive state. So here data are sent on the network in packets known as data frames. That means data frames, we got the term called data frames, means what? It is coming from the data link layer. So network layer is not at all related as far as bus architecture is concerned. So as far as, because it is only buses, it is nowhere dealing with the type of the underlying network, type of the topology, type of the technology used in the network. We are not bothering about that. So that is why it is purely, these bus architectures are purely meant to update the physical layer and the data link layer only. That is what we have to understand here. Then how does a data is simply been transmitted in this bus? By using this particular format known as the control word format to transmit the data on the bus. So there are so many fields like as something like arbitrary start bit and arbitration field, control field, data field, CRC field, acknowledgement, end of the frame field. So this arbitration field once again subdivided into 2 subfields called as identifier. Usually this identifier is normally called as a destination slave address identifier. And next is remote transmission request bit. What is the meaning of this remote transmission request bit? If at all master want to request the slave for the data on the data bus, then it is going to use this particular bit for that. Okay. Next one is going to be the control field. Control field means what? The control field is mandatory to control the flow of data on the bus. Therefore, we use this. The next is actual data field. Then CRC is for error detection and correction method. Acknowledgement field, it is actually left for the receiver to fill, and end of the frame bits. So these are all the various frames which we use to transmit the data. So let us look into how the data is being transmitted from master to the slave, right? Or it can be from slave to the master. So a data frame starts with a 1. If 1 is there means what? Data frame is going to come. That is the indication given by the master to the slave. And ends with a string of 7 zeros. 7 zero string we're going to use. If 7 zeros are there means what? It is nothing but end of the data packet. So there should be, there could be at least 3 bit fields between data frames. So between data frames, there should be 3 bit fields compulsorily. Okay, so that means here, you're not bothered about this. So just only follow this framework. The first field is the packet. The first field in the packet contains the packet's destination address. This is the first field in the packet after the start bit, called as destination address, and is known as the arbitration field. The destination field is basically 11 bits long. So that means you can have 11-bit address. That means in comparison to the CAN bus, you can address still many number of peripherals. Okay, so in the case of I2C, it supports maximum of 10 address bits. Here it is supporting 11 address bits. Now the trailing is what? Ending. Remote transmission request RTR request bit is set to 0 if the data frame is used to request data from the device specified by the identifier. That means identifier is going to specify the address of the slave. If this RTR is set to 0, means what? The master is requesting the slave to transmit its data. Okay, so that's what the RTR bit basically used for. Then next we have control field and data field, CRC field, most importantly. So when RTR is 1, the packet is used to write data to the destination identifier. That means if RTR is equal to 1, it means that the master want to write some data onto the slave. That is the meaning of this control bit. Okay. Then there is going to be one more field called as control field, provides an identifier extension and a 4-bit length for the data field and a 1 in between. That means it supports length of the field. Length of the field means what? What kind of data you are transmitting from 0 to 64 bytes. What is the length of the data bit that you are transmitting? Okay, so that information has to be transmitted by this data field. So that's what identifier, and extra one more extension identifier is provided to extend the control operations on the data. The next one is data. The data field is normally going to transmit 0 to 64 bytes depending on the value given in the control field. If the control field specifies the value of 64-bit, it is going to transmit 64-bit. The data frame, the data field is going to 64-bit. If the control field specifies only 8-bit, it transmits. So it is normally going to transmit only 8 bits of data. And finally, CRC bit, cyclic redundancy check field. It is normally used to check the correctness of the data which is being transmitted on the bus. Now, what about the internal architecture of the CAN bus? The architecture of CAN bus controller, how the CAN bus is going to be there. Now, we'll be connecting this. We'll be connecting one of the peripheral to the host. Some other computer. Host means some computer. Now there's going to be an interface between host computer and the CAN bus. CAN bus supports several other internal modules, that has protocol controller, status register, message objects, receive buffer, and bus interface. Now bus interface is normally used to provide the control signals, bus interface interacting signals from the CAN bus. Okay, so this is the architecture of this. Now the controller, just now we have shown the controller implements the physical and data link layers. Yeah, this is important. The bus control, the protocol control is going to change the programs or implementations at the data link layer and the physical layer, part of the OSI module. So it is normally going to control all that particular task over there. Okay. And since CAN is a bus, it does not need network layer services to establish end-to-end connection. This is what just now we spoke here. The CAN is nothing but a bus, simply group of wires is known as a CAN, and it does not need to really support the network layer. So it does not support the network layer for its operation, because network layer deals with the type of the network, technology involved in the network, all these things. So as it is purely a bus architecture, it need not support the network layer operations. Now the protocol called as control protocol block is responsible for determining when to send the messages. There is a control protocol controller. It is normally going to control the data transfers. When the data has to be transmitted, when the control signal has to be transmitted, is controlled by the protocol control block. So that's what the basic features of this CAN controller. The next one is advantages and disadvantages. What is the advantage? It is going to come with low cost, light in weight, and it is built in. It is going to support built-in error correction and detection methods using CRC codes. The system can be robust and flexible. Robustness, we know. Flexibility, we know. Flexibility means what? We can really get multiple functionalities from this type of the architecture. What are the drawback? Once again, the drawback there, which is there in the I2C bus architecture, is also there here. High cost for software development and maintenance. Limited length in communication, 40 meters only, very limited length. Possibility of signal integrity issues is going to be there here. What is the meaning of signal integrity issues? In embedded systems, we can connect different types of systems to perform a specific task. So in that process, integrity is going to become a performance bottleneck. Therefore, it suffers with the integrity issues. So this is what regarding the CAN bus and I2C bus architectures. So what we'll do is on Monday, I'm going to give you some assignment questions on the topics that I have gave you. So try to complete those assignments in this particular unit. Okay. Thank you very much for today's session.